Alison, I'm curious, because I suppose I've been in Fighting Words since it opened. So I'm curious about you starting this year and what brought you to Fighting Words, and what projects do you volunteer on, and what do you enjoy most about it?
Okay, well, I started in Fighting Words January 2020, so I only got a few physical workshops under my belt before we went online. But what brought me to Fighting Words was I had completed some study as a mature student in psychology and philosophy. I'd read to children through the school system, and I suppose I wanted to put my knowledge as a parent, and as we all homeschool a bit as parents, even when our children are in education. And I guess I missed children. My two were grown up. And so combining all those skills together and hoping that I could bring something to the table at Fighting Words, as well as learning a lot myself, which I really have done since the minute I walked in through the door. The best decision I ever made, to see so much creativity at work.
I know, because it's the magic, isn't it? It's when you see them walking in the door. And I love, as a volunteer, the fact that you're there when they walk in the door, you know, and you get to see them, and you're the person that kind of writes their name badges. I love writing the name badges, and you get to see them unlock the magic door, you know, and then they're in this world sitting on their cushions, and you know, you can see how they just love the whole, I suppose, the book, the way it's laid out on the screen, and they're writing a book. And when, depending on the group, you always see the number of children at the big front, you know, the enthusiastic children, the ones that kind of spend all their energy at the initial stage, at the group stage, and it's like they're the ones that kind of have the ideas for the character, the main character, and the white, or the, you know, the flip chart, and they see it broken into the, you know, the plot, the setting, the dialogue. Yes. I think at the primary level, when you see the younger children at that, and they see it laid out that clearly, like they might all have read books and they know the elements, but they mightn't have the language for it. They mightn't have, you know, so when they kind of say, oh, there's a person, they go, a character, they go, you can see them connecting the dots.
They're learning without realising they're learning.
In this kind of informal way.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's just, I love all of that. I see them, with the younger ones, I see that kind of light bulb moment go on. And then with the older age group, as you see, come to the older age of primary school, which are probably the ones I like the most, because they're the ones that have kind of started closing down on themselves. And you see primarily like 3 or 4 dictate that general discussion. And then you see the other ones at the back kind of paying such attention to what's going on, but not, you know, sticking their hands up or not participating. But you know that they're the ones who have already done their story for the tables. So when you sit down at the table then, and there's 2 or 3, you know, students, I love going to the students at that stage who haven't actively participated, but who have been engaged the whole time. So it's about watching who is sitting there.
I agree with you, Jeanette. I actually am more, I do the secondary school workshops and the kind of projects that happen over time, that you get to know the students and form a relationship. But that, when they come in and, you know, they're a bit like nudging and pushing and, you know, the normal dynamic.
I'm too cool.
Yeah, and they sit down then, and as a volunteer, you're sort of supporting the main, who's hosting the session. You're just moral support as much as anything else. And I really enjoy watching the dynamic of, as you say, the people who put their hand up, who've something to say, who sometimes need to be told, easy does it, let someone else speak. They're the ones, when you come to the table, have less to say.
They're spent.
I find myself observing the quiet ones, that I can see it percolating. And I'm always, like, when you go down to the table, as you say, some of those students are the ones who maybe have written before, maybe enjoy writing, and they just get going. Others are slightly trapped and closed. And I kind of think as a volunteer, it's about giving them time, not rushing them. So I always say, put your name on the page and write the date, and it's not a blank page anymore. And there's a kind of phew, because a blank page is awful.
Oh, it's so
It's so
daunting.
daunting.
Yeah.
So it's interesting seeing the change from the group dynamic, like you were saying, to the smaller 2 or 3 at a table.
And it's the ones then kind of go, I have to sit with my friend, I have to sit with my friend, we'll write together. And you kind of go, but why? And there's always one dominant one in those scenarios.
Yeah.
And it's about kind of saying, well, you can write together, but you can also write separately. And it's about confidence. It's about building confidence in
Yes.
kids.
Yeah.
And you can just see sometimes at a table, you can just see a child actually grow.
I love when it gets to that point. And in my head, it's always teenagers when I'm
Yeah.
talking about, but they want their teacher's approval. So I love it. They're sitting in the main group, and they're if there's a little bit of messing going on, I think the best role for a teacher is to hang back. There's enough volunteers there that teachers don't need to worry. But they'd be glancing back to see if they've said something a little bit that might be perceived as rude or cheeky. They're checking if that's okay. And I think it's great when the teacher just smiles or whatever. But occasionally somebody needs to be corrected, and that's okay too. But, then we work away as volunteers with the students, and then they've something to read out at the end. Invariably, they want their teacher's praise. And I love seeing that develop like that. It's outside the classroom, it's something different, it's something creative, but the teacher still has their role, albeit lightly. So they want the teacher to think that the teacher's impressed. And when it comes to reading out, this always fascinates me. When the storyteller, host or whatever, starts asking people to read their stuff, there's silence. No, oh, it's all right, or you read it. And next thing it's like, one person reads, and it's, can I read next? And can I read? And it gets to the point where sometimes there isn't time for everybody to read. So this kind of communal vibe happens where everyone's done the same. And like the stories can be so different with the same starting point. And I think that creates a confidence.
Oh, it's a huge thing,
that they
isn't it?
carry
Builds
through
as
all
it
their
goes.
schoolwork. You can approach things differently, and all is valid.
But I think that's a huge thing. I mean, like we had a couple of instances through workshops where I remember there was this girl. She was in an older age group, it's like a 6th class, and it was she stood up and she had an SNA in the class. So, but she stood up and she read out her story, and it was a great story. It was her ending to the story. And literally, the whole place went silent. The whole class was silent, because usually there's a round of applause. And the teacher was standing there, and the teacher kind of started crying. I was kind of going,
wow.
God, what have I done? I was there going, what have I done? And this was the first time the girl had ever spoken out loud in the class. Because she had a stutter. She'd had a stutter, and she had been very self-conscious and had never spoken in the class. And the whole class is sitting there going, what?
Gosh.
And then everybody just broke into this kind of thing. And the teacher was there going, afterwards, because, the facilitator at the time was going, she's never spoken in the class. That's the first time they've
Wow.
heard her voice. And you go, what
I know
was
what
the
caused
element there?
that.
What
Yes,
caused that?
yes,
And it
yes.
was that whole thing, as you said, that other people were reading out their stories, and it was a class. It was with the class, but it wasn't a classroom environment.
It has a momentum. A momentum
A momentum,
develops.
yeah.
Yes. And like you say, some of the teenagers in particular, they are maybe a bit reluctant. They're worried about peer pressure. They're worried about what the teacher thinks, the whole world thinks of them. They're so self-conscious. But it was like that. It was so heartwarming to do a Zoom during the COVID with a group of like transition year girls, and they've all got their phones going and they're in their own zone. But by the end of it, they had all pulled together and drawn out their creativity, and they said they would far rather do that than any of their schoolwork. You know, so there was a complete transformation from when we started, you know, the writing until the end.
I love that. I love the fact that it's kind of two strands. Like there's the collegiality and community by virtue of it being a class.
Yes.
They're a group of people together. But then they also develop as individuals and their own story and their own creativity.
Yes, exactly.
And I've heard Roddy say a few times when he hosts the sessions, you get to a point in the story where you can see people getting a bit fed up, they're irritated. That's not how they want the story to go. So he'd say, you can't write a story by committee. So now's the time to separate out.
That's
and
right.
everyone's going
Let
in
it
different
unleash
directions.
it.
And I love that when they go to the table and go, I
Yeah,
hate the
that's-
story. I hate
that's-
this story. Like,
yeah.
there's nothing, I'm not writing anything to do
Yeah,
with this. I
yeah.
hate this story. And go, well, what do you hate about it? You know, like, that's really interesting. What do you hate about it?
I didn't want that
I
to
didn't want,
happen
I didn't want
there.
that character. You know, I don't like that character. So kill the character, you know, or just
Yeah,
make them
yeah.
disappear.
Yes.
And they go,
invent
what?
your own, a new
What?
one.
And they go,
yeah.
yeah, so who did you want in there? I go, well, I wanted it to be a girl. I go,
Yeah,
well, why can't
the
it be a girl?
freedom to write what you
And you
want
can
to
just,
write.
and you can go,
Yeah.
but you can. And they
Yeah.
go, no, but you're supposed to tell me I'm doing wrong here. And I go, nope,
No.
everything's on the table. So, you know, we've had people just walk through the door and they've disappeared. You know, I said, you can just disappear them.
Yeah, yeah.
Why not? You know, it's like
That's
the,
brilliant,
you know,
yeah.
the Bobby Ewing in Dallas, you know. It's
Oh,
like, you
yeah,
know,
come back to
Come
life.
back to life,
right.
or, you know, you can have that person come back, or, you know, you can invent that blob called Bob, you
And
know.
they do feel, I think, don't they, safe within the Fighting Words bubble, shall we call it, that
Yeah.
safe space where they can just be.
There's no right and wrong. That's what you said.
right.
There's no right and wrong.
That's right, they can just be. And even things maybe that might be coming up that they have even happened at home, we even find that, or a little problem that might have happened at school or something, and they might share it. So we kind of provide more even than just helping with their writing. I think their well-being, it comes
Absolutely.
into, you know, a big factor in the whole
And you've
process.
done creative music writing online, haven't you?
That's
Alison?
right, yeah, we actually did that live. We did that last January. That was actually with adults, it wasn't with children,
Oh,
so
okay.
it was songwriting for adults. Yeah, I've done quite a cross-section of not just the workshops with the teachers
Do you know, when you,
and children.
that's interesting when you talk about the workshops with adults, because I volunteered in a project, God, I'm confused with years now. We had to finish early because of COVID. So I presume it was kind of September, October 2019. And it ran through, well, we finished online, which still worked really smoothly, with teachers. So, you know, the whole dynamic of the adult who is in their role as a teacher coming in with the students is suddenly the student, for want of a better way of putting it. And I spoke to a few of them afterwards, or not even afterwards, at the time, and they were saying, oh my God, it's kind of scary when you walk in here. And when you sit down to write something, and sort of the armour of them being the teacher is gone, and they're the vulnerable, for want of a better way of putting it, student. And they're starting to write something, and they've the blank page.
The blank page thing again.
And
yeah.
it took a bit of, like, it was such a fun, rewarding project to work on, because they wrote such brilliant pieces that took very little copy editing, obviously. But I think it really helped them in terms of understanding what their students felt. And then they ended up getting the same buzz from it that the students got.
I mean, you're talking about the experience as a volunteer, but I was there as, I suppose I was involved then with my kids' primary school, and they had both attended the Fighting Words workshops, and then going back into the primary school and seeing how the teachers who I would have known, they brought that, I suppose the essence.
Yes,
They brought the
yeah,
essence
yeah.
back, and to them the essence was getting the kids away from their desks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was a
Yes.
huge thing for them, you know.
Yes.
And I was really interested that they thought that the creative thing happened away from their desks, because maybe when they're in their desks, it's, you know, I'm the student who does this, and
confinement.
it's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yes,
confinement.
yes.
And so they would bring them into the library and they'd sit them on the floor on the cushions, or they, during the summer, they would bring them outside under the tree and they'd say, let's write a story. Let's do the fighting words thing.
Yeah.
Remember we did the fighting words? Or they'd say, last year we were in fighting words with the different class, you know. And they'd say, this is what we did. We'll write the story. And they're all coming at it with ideas, and it's a fun...
It kind of shakes you up to get out of the physical class. I mean, you don't have to. Even to pull the desks back and the chairs back within a classroom.
Or turn backwards.
And pull.
Yeah.
Like an odd time I've seen where they've taken, I know like with the secondary school workshops, it starts with a role play situation and it's a bit like awkward, but it gets the story started. Sometimes they've taken a story someone has written and people have acted it. That's fantastic. It brings a whole other dimension. And again, the whole class buy in, you know, to the group and being part of something special, but it's like their own mini little improv.
It's the mini little improv, and there is a lot, as you say, I don't know, there's a lot of, I think when you're in the classroom, it's all about, in some cases, crowd control,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, or
yeah.
keeping the focus, or you have to get through the syllabus, or you have to do this. And there's just something about breaking that. There's an awful lot to kind of associate the fighting words and the opening up of this creativity with a change in physical space.